is a really great time to engage your community with a survey because they have a lot to say. And as we go into the next school year and we've wrapped up this year of new experiences, it's going to be really important to survey our stakeholders to see, what are you worried about getting into the new year? What this past year, now that we've got it under our belt, what kind of things do you need, or are you worried about, or are you looking forward to really be able to get all of that information from your different stakeholders to really be as prepared as you can be going into the new year, and to be able to really give the resources and the materials that you can that are needed for all of your stakeholders to really be successful.
COVID-19 has brought change on almost a daily basis, and it's impacted every single element of life, including school, obviously. And both parents and students and staff and leadership in schools have had to make changes and have had to adjust throughout. And so it's important, as we try and figure out what the new normal will be, that they are clearly communicating the vision and the process for getting back to this new normal. And I think now more than ever, it's important to be very clear and concise and transparent in your communication, because everyone has experienced so many changes, and often really, quick changes, or, from day-to-day changes. And so finding a way to communicate, like, this is the most up-to-date information, this is what we're basing those decisions on, I think is more valuable than ever.
Everybody's got opinions, and that was probably more clear than ever this past school year. But essentially, everybody in the district wants a voice, whether or not they work for the district, or they're a student in the district, or they have a child in the district. And so making sure that you communicate about what's going on. When we return in the fall, there might be students who haven't been in a school building in 16 plus months. And that is going to be a big adjustment. So, what is normal, what was normal is not going to ever be normal again. I think we're looking at a new normal.
I think one of the good things about surveys is that the information that you get from them can help inform those other decisions that you have to make. So when looking at budgeting, getting feedback from your community about how and where you feel funds should be dispersed, because you definitely want to have your community feel like they have a say in these key decisions, because that's really going to help promote trust and a sense of community within a district, which is really important right now, especially after everything that we went through with this last year. And with surveys, you're able to reach out to such a wide group of people at the same time. And it's a relatively easy thing to send out a survey and get your feedback back, and kind of look at those numbers and the data and be able to have that to make those informed decisions. Thinking about, as a district, how you want to adapt your surveying strategy as we get into the new school year is going to be really important.
I think it has been a real learning process for everyone to figure out the best ways to capture important data about the impact of COVID-19. And so a lot of districts have refocused their attention on their traditional surveys, but they've created new questions or updated items so that they can capture specifically the impact of COVID. So we're still asking a lot of the traditional questions in our surveys, but they might be tweaked to recognize the different learning environments, for example, or the different physical changes that had to be made to a school for health and safety. So largely what I'm seeing is that instead of getting rid of the important data that districts have been collecting for a long time, they are adjusting and reframing and asking questions that capture the shift as opposed to a different approach, if you will.
The community will provide feedback regardless of whether or not a district is asking for it. They'll get it in the form of phone calls, school board meeting, comments, emails, everything. There are opportunities for people to share feedback, but I think providing a survey allows a focused effort from the district to, one, collect data, but also to collect it on areas that they are also interested in focusing on. So academic support, for example, or student support. So being able to collect very focused and specific data is really helpful for districts. And we're also in an environment where, depending on the state you live, some families might have more opportunities to change school districts, and there's a lot more virtual learning options. So now you may not even be bound by your geographic location. And so I think making sure you provide opportunities for feedback or to collect feedback in surveys, it's a great way to do that, will help provide the space for people to share what they're thinking and build trust between the community. If you don't have trust, there's a lot of opportunities for people to leave now, I think, than more so than ever. So really providing that focused attention on data collection is important and valuable.
I think that what's really important is that school leaders are thinking about what is going to be useful data and what will be actionable. So as they start to think about what types of surveys they might want to run, being really thoughtful about what kind of information they need to make decisions, what kind of information they need to be able to communicate effectively to their stakeholders, and what kind of information will be useful in decision-making processes. I think that's what school leaders need to be thinking about.
So when we look at how we collect data, there's a lot of opportunity there. Surveys are by far one of the things that we do most frequently, just because we can reach a large group of people at the same time. But one of the things that I love about research is that there are different methods for collecting feedback, aside from scaled questions and quantitative data, but also that qualitative data. And where you see qualitative data come through is in the open-ended responses, if you ask on a survey, as well as getting into focus groups and interviews. And these are really meaningful because they can provide that why behind perceptions and the why behind your participants answered or feel a certain way towards something within the district.
So I think qualitative and quantitative data are certainly both important pieces to collect. And some districts will do focus groups first and then use that focus group data to then develop a survey to see if the greater community has similar feedback to what was in the focus group. Another option is to do it opposite. So you collect the survey data and then you do the focus groups to dive deeper into maybe the why behind certain responses. There's not really a right or a wrong way to do it, but doing those two in tandem, I think, really can provide valuable insight for the district and help with whatever action plan that they need to do moving forward.
I really believe in the value of qualitative data. And I think that often we try and capture very complex and even abstract concepts with numbers. And I think sometimes that makes it really hard to understand how to use data. And so I like to pair survey work with more qualitative research. So using things like focus groups or listening sessions, even things like audits or more ethnographic approaches to research where you can partner researcher or a company like K-12 Insight with school leaders or staff to help capture the thoughts, the feelings, the experiences, and also really utilize the space and the place and the time to provide nuance or complexity to research.
When you're in a school district and you have so many different stakeholders, whether it's parents, staff, teachers, community members, students, there are so many moving parts that you really need to be able to gather information and perceptions and data from everybody. The key to that is you need to be strategic, not only about when you're surveying them, but who you're surveying. So if you're asking on a topic about school quality, you don't want to send that survey out to all of your employees. You just want to send them out to campus-based staff. And I would definitely recommend to school districts to not overlook the students. Typically we recommend districts survey students at the secondary level, so grades 6 through 12. But we're also finding that you can get worthwhile data from students at the elementary level in grades 3 through 5 by doing simplified surveys for them. So definitely don't overlook the student voice. I think that is a mistake that we've seen a lot of districts make, is thinking that by getting parent data and teacher data or staff data, they get enough, but they don't. You really want to hear from your students because those are the ones that we're really serving. So, this school year, I think we've seen teachers and school staff feel more overworked, more overwhelmed, and more undervalued than ever before. And it's hard, and this year could very well be a pivotal moment for a lot of people who are thinking about either switching to a different district or thinking about leaving the teaching profession altogether. And so being able to use a survey to reach out to your staff, to listen to them and listen to what their needs are, listen to how they're feeling, is going to be really important because, one of the biggest things is that you want your employees to feel heard. You want them to know and feel that you care about them and you appreciate them and that their thoughts matter. And so surveys are a great way to collect data on professional development. What is it that they feel that they want to know or learn? Collect data on their satisfaction, like how happy are you in your job? How happy are you, with your relationship with your colleagues and your principals or supervisors, as well as even just their social and emotional health. We've seen a lot of districts not only do social emotional surveys for students, but also check in on the well-being of their staff. And that makes a huge difference when you feel like your administrators and your bosses care about your well-being and who you are and what you need and want to be successful in your position. It makes you feel more motivated to be engaged in your job. One of the big things I will say, though, is it's not just about listening. It's about taking the information, digesting the information, learning from it, and then doing something with it. I think people often underestimate that there is an art to survey design. So it's not just about using a language that can be understood by a wide range of people. It's also a lot of attention to detail. So you want to make sure that the scale fits properly with your survey question. You want to make sure that all of your questions kind of match up. So if you're using one scale throughout a survey, that they're all going in the same direction or that they all have the different answer options. And that you're kind of, if you're switching between scales, that you're having a similar interval in between your different scales. So there's a lot of detail that goes into designing a survey that people can often overlook if they haven't had experience with doing it. I think one of the things to keep in mind when you're looking at surveying your community is to make sure that you're being very intentional about the data that you're collecting and what it is that you want to know, so that you can make sure you can design your survey in a way that can be comprehended by your community, in a way that it can reach your community in all of its different subgroups. So being cognizant of, pockets of your community that may be not native English speakers. So maybe the survey needs to be translated. You want to make sure that your survey is accessible to everybody so that you're not just getting the affluent areas and their feedback, because then that's going to hinder you from really being able to make that change that's going to be district-wide and really impactful to your entire school community. So one of the most effective ways that data can be used by a district is to not only look at that district level view, but also look at those disaggregated views. So that could be by school or department. It could be at the grade level. It can be by different student programs or student subgroups. Because you can get these little nuances that something might be happening at one school that's not happening at another, or it can be happening with one group of employees and not another group. So to be able to really effectively use the data, you need to have all of the pieces that give you the big picture and then the small picture. And once you have all of that, then you start going through the data and you start highlighting where you've got success. You start highlighting where you might have a question about why something is the way that it is, or there might be a finding that doesn't quite make sense that you want to explore further. And then sometimes you get those findings back that just really aren't favorable. And so it's great to, once you go through your data, kind of highlight with plus signs, minus signs, question marks, what you're seeing and what you're finding, both strengths and areas for improvement. And then from there, you take those and figure out where you want to start. Typically you can start with something like communication that might be a lower hanging fruit. Maybe you're not communicating to parents in the way that's most preferred by them. So you can change some of your communication plans. And then you might find some things that require a little bit more effort or require a longer term plan. And that's when you can start figuring out the why behind the reason why you might be having this trouble in your district or at your school. And once you kind of get down to that root cause and the why, then you can start developing an action plan, short-term, long-term, who's responsible for doing what, a realistic timeline, and setting those very actionable, realistic goals to be able to then track and see where you're improving or where maybe you need to be a little bit more flexible and adaptable in your plan to be able to make that change.
I think that surveys can help us better understand people's perceptions and understanding of things like school funding and learning loss. And I think also it's important to recognize that surveys also communicate your values. So when you set up a survey and you send it to key stakeholders and they read through what types of questions you're asking or items that you include, and you ask for stakeholder input, that communicates very clearly to your key stakeholders what you value and what's really at the top of mind for you. And so that it really does two things in the end. It helps to understand what your stakeholders know and how they feel. And it may give you data that helps you to take action on their priorities, but it also helps to collect data for you to better communicate. It helps you to say, here's the decisions we're making and why we're making them. Here's how that impacts you. And even when you have to make those tough decisions that aren't necessarily popular, it helps you to see, it helps you to understand who already gets it and who may need more support and coming to understand it. And it gives you a clear direction often in how to communicate your decision-making process and your priorities.
Initially, when the pandemic happened, we saw a pretty good increase in participation rates across all of our different stakeholder groups because parents were more available. They had more access to technology. They were more engaged in a technology aspect with their students. Students were right there in front of computers, as were teachers and staff. So it was a lot more convenient for them to respond, and we saw that in our participation rates. But as the school year went on, especially towards the end of the school year, we saw a decrease in those responses, putting them kind of below what we normally see. And so as a team, we kind of dug into it. We talked to some of our districts about what might be going on, why aren't we getting people to respond? And they were fatigued. What we saw is we heard from our points of contacts that different schools or teachers or departments within the district were sending out surveys, without any real structure or calendar. So people were just tired of getting the surveys. And so the big thing to think about as we go into the new year is to not do that again. And so to try to find some way to strategize as a district, as a school or a department, having a calendar, figuring out not only when to survey, but who is surveying, so that you don't have the district sending out a survey district-wide to everybody, but then also this department is at the same time. So really communicating within the district about surveying plans, and seeing where maybe surveys can be combined together or better staggering them, so as to not over-survey your community.
Being able to provide stakeholders an opportunity to know that, hey, we're going to be asking you questions on a survey on X date, and sending out social media blasts and sending out the information ahead of time is really helpful, especially because there's been so many last minute decisions in the last year. So having an opportunity to be prepared for something is helpful. And then they can reflect, they have time to reflect on the feedback. And so hopefully by the time the survey opens, they're a little bit more thoughtful and provide some rich data.
So when surveys are done longitudinally, administrators are able to more easily track changes in perceptions over time, both positive and negative.
Perception really is for the person who is living that experience. It's their reality. And so it's important to recognize perception not as just opinion or not just as what one person thinks, but it is their reality and how they experience the world.
With this, if you don't know that there's a problem, you can't really focus on it. So I think just being able to identify gaps between your stakeholders is a really good opportunity to see maybe where you need to focus your attention.
So right now, some of the trends that we've seen is we've been doing a lot of listening surveys or strategic plan surveys, as well as a lot of distance learning feedback surveys. So what we're seeing many districts do is, now that they've had this last year where they had to offer some sort of online or virtual academy, they're thinking about continuing to have that within the new school year as an option for families that may be more comfortable having an online experience versus an in-person classroom experience. And so we're doing a lot of surveys on distance feedback, both about how they felt about the content, the operations of it, the accessibility and availability of technology. So that's been a big one that we've been doing. And then the other big one is strategic planning. A lot of schools are now kind of having to navigate where they are and what they've been doing and where they're going. So they're using strategic plan listening surveys to get feedback from their community about how they feel about what the current goals are, as well as what future goals and outcomes they want for the district. Surveys can be really helpful for districts in kind of this strategic management, continuous cycle of improvement piece. Because what you can do, or what happens when you do a survey, is the first time you run it, you get this baseline data. So it lets you know where your district is right now. And then when you continue over the years and you longitudinally have this calendar of survey launches and survey distribution, you can see year to year how your district is doing compared to that baseline. So if you run your survey one year, you implement a program in your district, and then a year or two down the road, you run the same survey again, you can see where you've either improved or not improved in these places that your program was meant to improve. And then that can help you figure out, okay, maybe I need to be a little bit more flexible in how we're doing this program, or we need to make changes. And so this way you're, continuously evolving in your district and your programs. It can help you be proactive in looking at issues and uncovering where there might be potential issues within the district.
There's been questions around crisis management and addressing learning loss. That's something that's been top of mind. You certainly have. I recently surveyed a district where they asked how prepared students are, and staff members had said that they thought students were less prepared than, there was a perception gap, that the students thought they were more prepared than the parents, and the parents thought that students were more prepared than the staff. And I think just in general, just so addressing learning loss, crisis management, student support was one that came up, of course, with social and emotional learning. We always have asked questions about student support, but I think that really fine-tuning some of those questions has been big this last school year and will continue to be so in the future. And then also staff support. That was something that was new this year. Some districts would ask, we've had questions about work environment and feeling, staff morale, questions along that line. But this past school year, there was really focused questions about staff emotional support. Same, we've been asking students how they're feeling, and really just making sure that staff members are feeling are okay as well.
So I think when designing a survey or considering what kind of work you would like to do in the research world, you can think about it in the same way that you think about lesson planning, and that's backwards design. What are your goals? What are your priorities? What information do you need to know? And by asking good research questions and using the research questions to set your research agenda or your research methodologies, I think that will ultimately help district leaders or school leaders to be strategic and purposeful in how they collect data and what they do with it.